Hi, guys. Welcome to Exodus 28 as we continue our way verse by verse through the book of Exodus. This is a chapter about the priestly garments. So, usually, probably about this time, most people would click off priestly garments. All of this temple and tabernacle construction seems like so few people would give it the time and give it the opportunity. I hope you give it a moment. Hope you listen to some of this, because it really is so much of it to be pondered. It's all in there for a reason. Everything's in a Bible for a reason. And when you look at these details around the priest, particularly when we know in the New Testament that we are called as Christians as a kingdom of priests, and so we have the Holy Spirit in us, and so that there's a connection to that, that maybe we should probe and consider. So we look at these Old Testament passages because they speak to us, because they have meaning and purpose, and I find them fascinating. I'm probably a Bible geek, but I think there's lots there to learn. To really get our eyes on the Lord and see details about the ways of the Lord that we've never seen before. So this is why I make the videos, to help bring the Bible to life, and try to throw it in somewhere that if you like this, if you're a little bit of a Bible geek and you appreciate some of this, hit the subscribe button, hit the like, and it lets me know that people are watching and want more, and I'll keep making them. Chapter 28, the priestly garments then. Have Aaron your brother brought to you from among the Israelites, along with his sons Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar, so that they may serve me as priest. Imagine Moses coming off the mountain and going to Aaron and saying, Aaron, God has chosen you and your family and all your sons. You're going to be priests, and all your descendants after you are going to be priests. I wonder how Aaron felt about that initially. Probably not something he ever considered before, being a priest. He was the oldest son. He was Moses' older brother. And I can't imagine just that moment when all of this adventure, all that is going on around them, when it was declared that Aaron, you're going to be the priest in your bloodline, and all your sons are going to be priests. Well, one, it's obviously a great honor that God has called you to do this, but it'd also be a very intimidating honor and a very intimidating thing, and it brings it brought with it lots of all the cultural understandings of what a priest would be, and so they had a lot to learn, and that was probably the biggest thing. Was you've been called to be a priest, and what does that mean, and what do I know about being a priest? And Moses saying, you're about to find out, as God gives you all of these things and all of these patterns to learn from. And so Aaron was to be the priest, the high priest, bring his sons Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. We know Nadab and Abihu didn't last long. It's almost like this role of being a priest went to their head. There was an irreverence about them that showed itself, and they didn't make it very long. And we'll get to that later in our studies through the Bible. And then Eleazar and Ithamar. Ithamar is actually Eli, who was the high priest through some of Samuel, the book of Samuel, and we see Eli as the high priest, so he descended from Ithamar. So Ithamar takes care of the construction of the tabernacle, while Eleazar seems to be more of the spiritual side. Ithamar maybe the physical side of the tabernacle is kind of what we get a glimpse of. But all of these were to be priests. Being a priest wasn't sort of pictures being a priest as the guy that is always in prayer or offering sacrifices or something. But in fact, to be a priest, there was so much work around the temple, so much that was done by these priests, and so it wasn't just all just these sort of holy moments that we get a glimpse of, but it was lots of hard work, and Spiritual work is lots of hard work, and there was lots of gritty work and lots of ugly things that they did to, just to sacrifice and offering sacrifices was a gruesome and ugly thing, and that was the hard work of being a priest. Verse 2: make sacred garments for your brothers, or for your brother Aaron, to give him dignity and honor. So the garments were to cover the man, to present them with dignity and honor as they stood as representatives of God. They were to be set apart, and that was in part the appearances that they would appear differently from others, and so they would be set apart and for dignity and honors, so that when people looked at them, that they looked on these garments, and there was a dignity and an honor associated with those garments because of their service to the Lord and to the people on behalf of the Lord. Verse 3: tell all the skilled workers to whom I have given wisdom in such manners that they are to make garments for Aaron for his consecration, set apart, consecration being set apart for service, so he may serve me as a priest. These are the garments there to make: a breastpiece, an ephod, a robe, a woven tunic, a turban, and a sash. They are to make these sacred garments for your brother Aaron and his sons, so they may serve me as priest. Have them use gold, blue, purple, scarlet yarn, and fine linen. So these are the same building materials of the curtains of the temple. So much of the same stuff would be used in making the garment for the priests. So verse 6: make an ephod. An ephod is like almost presented like almost like a vest type of arrangement. So make an ephod of gold, blue, purple, scarlet yarn, and finely twisted linen. The work of skilled hands it is to have 2 shoulder pieces attached to 2 of its corners, so that it can be fastened. It is skillfully woven. Waistband is to be like it, or of one piece with a ephod, and made with gold and with blue, purple, and scarlet yarn with finely twisted linen. Take 2 onyx stones and engrave on them the names of the sons of Israel in the order of their birth: 6 names on one stone and 6 names on the other stone, and engrave the names of the sons on these stones. And so this engraving would be just like engraving on jewelry or something. It was just very meticulous, very fine work. So imagine trying to get all these names in order on these stones that would be on the shoulders of the priests. So engrave the names of the sons of Israel on the 2 stones the way a gem cutter engraves a seal. And so the example given, you can imagine a little a seal that's used on clay or wax to design just a little small seal, how meticulous that work would be. And so this was somebody with lots of skill in doing those kinds of things. And so they were to engrave that like they would a seal, then mount the stones in a gold filigree settings, and fasten them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod as memorial stones for the sons of Israel. Aaron is to bear the names. This is the purpose of it. So Aaron is to bear the names on the shoulders as a memorial before the Lord. And so anytime Aaron went before the Lord, that he would be carrying those names of his brothers, of the tribes of Israel, that he would be carrying them before the Lord as a memorial. And so anytime, so I think it was the thought process for Aaron himself and for the priest, that as he went into the presence of the Lord, as he was wearing this, going about his priestly duties, that nothing he did was about him any longer, that he in fact was ministering to the Lord on one part, but he's also bearing and standing in the place of all of his of all of those tribes, representing all those tribes in the service that he did before the Lord. And so it was so that he would never forget, so that others would never forget, that they would look on this with, again, the idea of that dignity and the respect and the reverence they would have for the priest and the work that he did, and remember that he represented all of the tribes. And so we see this reverence, this respect, and it's fascinating because then we see, even in Jesus' time, a respect for the office of the high priest. But unfortunately, that office of high priest became such a political thing when Rome got involved that sort of polluted it, and the high priest's role was almost a political appointment that Rome took charge of, and really was just another sign of a whole messed up temple system that became something different than what the Lord intended it to be. And so they would wear these names on there, and I don't think I finished verse 13. Make gold filigree settings and 2 braided chains of pure gold like a rope, and attach the chains to the settings. So this ephod, imagine this ephod and this shoulder pieces with the stones mounted on them, and they fasten, and it goes around their waist in some way. Go on to the breastpiece, verse 15. Fashion a breastpiece for making decisions and the work of skilled hands. And so you see this breastpiece, when we get done, we'll see this, it attaches to the ephod. And so the breastpiece and the ephod almost become this one piece that they wear, that it's often just referred to as the ephod, but the breastpiece becomes part of it. And so while it's listed separately here as something they're making, later you'll see it almost spoken of as these priestly vestments, these garments that they wear, and sometimes it just says the ephod, which is almost talking about the priest's garments, including the breastpiece. So fashion this breastpiece, and it had one purpose, for making decisions. And it is the work of skilled hands. Make it like the ephod of gold and blue, purple and scarlet, finely twisted linen. It is to be square, a span long and a span wide. They believe a span is about half of a cubit being 18 inches, so a span would be about 9 inches. Some say it's the span of your hand, the distance of your hand. It's probably messed up on my hands because my hands are small, but somewhere around 9 inches is what they think this was. So you're talking about a 9-inch square breastpiece. Then mount 4 rows of precious stones on it. The first row shall be carnelian, chrysolite, and beryl. The second row shall be turquoise, lapis lazuli, and emerald. The third row, jacinth, agate, amethyst. The fourth row shall be topaz, onyx, and jasper. These stones are the words for these stones. You see some of these stones in Eden, in the garden. You see some of these stones spoken of around the throne in the Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Revelation throne room visions. And then you see it around the New Jerusalem. You see some of those stones. They're never just all listed exactly the same. These words for these stones are the translations that they believe to be right, but you go to another translation and you'll see those don't all line up, that others see that those stones. Some of these things are color-wise and makeup are so close together that it's hard for them to be consistent with it all the way through. And so you'll see those listed slightly different in different translations. None of them, though, line up exactly all the way through from, like the stones that are shown in Eden, the stones that are shown in other places in the scriptures. But these stones, again, are given, whatever the words were given with purpose, associated with each of these tribes. So these 12 stones were to represent those tribes. And so these are the 12 stones, one for each of the names of the son of Israel, almost like it probably not what we think of birthstones, but it's a similar thought. It's a stone representing that tribe. And one for each name of the sons of Israel, each engraved like a seal with the name of one of the tribes. And so each one of those stones would have a name. And you notice it doesn't necessarily tell you, it gives you the first row, second row, third row, each of those is to have a name. But in this case, it doesn't necessarily say that they're in order like it did previously on those that said put them in order of birth. You would assume that they would do that, put them in order of birth, but it doesn't necessarily say that here. Each engraved with the son's name, again, is another way, as he's has these 12 representations of the 12 tribes on this breastpiece for a very specific reason, which we'll talk about in a second. For the breastpiece, make braided chains of pure gold like rope. Make 2 gold rings for it. Fasten them to the corners of the breastpiece. Fasten the 2 gold chains to the rings at the corner of the breastpiece and the other ends of the chains to the 2 settings, attaching them to the shoulder pieces of the ephod at the front. Make 2 gold rings and attach them to the other 2 corners of the breastpiece on the inside edge next to the ephod. Make 2 more gold rings and attach them to the bottom of the shoulder piece on the front of the ephod, close to the seam, which is just above the waistband of the ephod. The rings of the breastpiece are to be tied to the rings of the ephod with a blue cord connecting it to the waistband so that the breastpiece will not swing out from the ephod. So you see that this breastpiece is going to be attached to the shoulder pieces with gold chain, this 9-inch square, and then the bottom rings would tie to the waistband with blue cord so this doesn't swing out. You can imagine the priests bending over and working and doing things that this thing wasn't supposed to be swinging around loosely like that. That it was important that it stay somewhat attached to the front of them, secured to the front. Verse 29, then when Aaron enters the holy place, he will bear the names of the sons of Israel over his heart on the breastpiece of decision as a continuing memorial for the Lord. So as he bears the weight of the tribes on his shoulders, that he goes in there, it's as if he bears their problems, their weight, their sin, their, everything about them, he bears it on his shoulders. But he also bears this representation of the 12 tribes on his breast also. And this would be the place where they would, remember this breastpiece was to make decisions. And so when decisions were made with the breastpiece before the Lord, that he was making decisions that affected all 12 tribes. He wasn't just making decisions for himself or what between him and the Lord, but he's making decisions representative of those 12 tribes. And so when he entered the holy place, he was going to bear those names of the sons over his heart on the breastpiece of decision as a continuing memorial before the Lord. Verse 30, also put the Urim and the Thummim in the breastpiece, so it may be over Aaron's heart whenever he enters the presence of the Lord. And thus Aaron will always bear the means of making decisions for Israelite over the heart before the Lord. And so pretty important passage there. One, it's that responsibility to bear this over his heart, that any decision he made would be for those tribes, and that he was representing them. So tremendous amount of responsibility that he could never forget. And so that's a continuing memorial. The Urim and the Thummim were a process by which they make decisions. There's kind of some different opinions about that. Nobody really knows, because the Bible doesn't say, well, this is how you make them. There was no directions on the Urim and the Thummim. It was as if they knew what that was. And you can almost imagine Moses saying, put the Urim and the Thummim in this breastpiece, and like, what is a Urim and the Thummim? So somebody knew. They speak of it as if they knew. And the one word I think Urim means, and sometimes they list them both words together, being glorious light, real bright shining light. And so some think that as they would stand before the Lord, they would ask a question of the Lord, and that the Urim or the Thummim would light up supernaturally, sort of reflect light from within it, and that light would give an indication of almost like a yes or no answer that the Lord would offer to the questions that were presented. So this Urim and Thummim were, they believe, sort of this stone, this precious stone, that these two stones that would light up supernaturally. They were kept in this sort of pocket of the breastplate for making decisions before the Lord. And so when decisions were made, they were made with all 12 tribes on his heart, the weight of the 12 tribes on his shoulders. And it just shows the responsibility of what he was doing, and the weight that never went away when he was ministering before the Lord, the weightiness of what he was called to do, which is really worth considering, worth thinking about, especially in the context as our role and our calls, each of us on our life. So the other priestly garments then, verse 31, make the robe of the ephod entirely of blue cloth, with an opening for the head in the center. So far on the priestly garments, we've just talked about kind of the upper body with this vest type ephod with a breastplate on the front of it. So this is the remainder, the main part of their garment. So make the robe of the ephod entirely blue cloth with an opening for the head. There shall be woven edge like a collar around the opening so that it will not tear. Make pomegranates of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn around the hem of the robe. And pomegranates, just this sort of this picture of, many say, like vitality, of blessing, of God's provision. And so there's this becomes these little pomegranates alternating on the bottom of the hem of this robe, alternating with gold bells between them. Imagine all these little gold bells all the way around this garment that the priest would sort of ring when he walked, that he would have this natural jangle about him as he performed his work, as he did his duties. And so the gold bells and the pomegranates altered around the hem of the robe. Aaron must wear it when he ministers. The sound of the bells will be heard when he enters the holy place before the Lord, and when he comes out, so that he will not die. You see some interesting things done with this verse. And there's always the story that they tied a rope on the high priest, so if he ever died, they didn't hear the bells, they could pull him out. And I don't remember anywhere in the Bible that says that, but the bells, it does talk about the bells right here, that the sound of the bells will be heard when he enters the holy place. I read one commentary that says, well, that's so that God knows when he comes into the holy place. Well, I don't think God needs like a doorbell to tell him when the priest has come in to do something, that God was distracted and he didn't know the priest come in until he heard the bells. I'm not buying that. But I do think these bells were more of a reminder for the priest. I don't think these bells were for God. I think these bells were for the priest. And anyone that didn't have those bells, anyone that approached the temple, the Holy of Holies, or thought that they could minister. And we see this through the Bible. Someone who takes this role and says, well, I can do what the priest does, and they go do it, and it messes things up and becomes a sin in their life and has tremendous consequences. And so these bells serve as a reminder of the high priest and of the responsibility, and that those bells, he was supposed to wear those garments, and there would never be a temptation to enter in and not change into those garments to wear some other garment and go in and act as a priest, but that these garments were special. These garments weren't. There was nothing humble about these garments. They were flashy, and they were to cover the man, to point to the Lord, and reflect the glory of the Lord in many ways. And so there was nothing reserved about these or modest about these garments. They were to be flashy, and to have these bells and was a reminder, and to go in without the bells ringing, without that priestly garment, was to bring death. And so they had to have these. The sound of the bells will be heard when he enters the holy place before the Lord, and if there's no sound of bells, that there's going to be death. And so I think that's how that plays out. I think that's the purpose. It's a reminder for the man. God doesn't need a doorbell on the Holy of Holies. Verse 36, make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it on a seal, as on a seal, holy to the Lord. So it's the same thought process of the engraving, like they would on engraving, the very meticulous, that they would engrave on this plate, holy to the Lord, and fasten a blue cord to it, attach it to the turban, and it is to be on the front of the turban. It is to be on Aaron's forehead, and bear the guilt, and he will bear the guilt involved in the sacred gifts. The Israelites consecrate whatever the gift may be. It will be on Aaron's forehead continually, so that he will be acceptable to the Lord. It's fascinating that the seal, this seal, is to be like a seal, and it's to fasten, and it's to be on Aaron's forehead. Forehead means literally right between the eyes, and which is fascinating because we see this same idea of being sealed. We see it in Revelation, where we see the sealing of the 144,000 means sealed right between the eyes. We see the mark that would the mark of the beast would be on the forehead, and that's a seal in very much the same way that would be sealed right as if right between the eyes. And so it's kind of interesting that this is a sealing, a marking of this priest, that he is holy to the Lord, that when he is consecrated, he is marked in this way, holy to the Lord. He's going to bear this mark, and with that, bearing the guilt involved in the sacred gift, is probably to be understood more of he's bearing the responsibility of those sacred gifts. So gifts that were offered, gifts that were set apart for the service of God, consecrated for God's service, that he bore the responsibility for those gifts, and should any of those gifts not be used appropriately, wisely, or whatever, that the guilt was on him for that. So he would bear the guilt involved with those things, and whatever those gifts may be. And so that was to be on Aaron's forehead continually. That was, again, this isn't a one time, this isn't short term, but this is part of being that high priest, that would be part of the job. Verse 39, weave the tunic. So we saw the blue robe, we saw the turban, now the plate on the turban. Weave a tunic of fine linen, and make the turban of fine linen, the sash is to be the work of an embroiderer, make tunics, sashes, and caps for Aaron's sons, to give them dignity and honor. And so we're talking about the garments for Aaron's sons now. They were to be of the same thing, the same stuff, and it was to bring them dignity and honor, again, to cover the sin-fallen man, but to cover them in a reflection of the Lord and the things of the Lord, and that pointed to the glory of the Lord and away from the man. It's interesting because we see, like, the Pharisees made this big show in their flashy garments and all this thing, and it brought attention to them as Pharisees. And it was very clear in this that these holy men was not to bring attention to them, but a dignity and honor in their service before the Lord. And it was as if any attention towards them was to be pointed and aimed and diverted, I guess is maybe the better word, towards the Lord, that it was for his glory, and their service was strictly for him. And so there was nothing about them. And so they were to make these tunics, sashes, and caps for Aaron's sons, give them this dignity and honor. Verse 41, after you put these clothes on your brother Aaron and his sons, anoint them, anoint and ordain them, consecrate them so that they may serve me as priests. And so there was anointing, there was an ordination process, and together those were the consecration. Consecration is to set them apart to be priest within a tabernacle, priest to minister to the Lord, and to be responsible for the process of worship that was going to be put forth through the law after they built this tabernacle. And in order for them to be consecrated, there had to be an anointing, and the anointing was with oil. And then this ordination process was a 7-day ordination. The word means put your hand to this, and so it was kind of a two-part meaning. It was like putting your hand to the plow, putting your hand to work, that you were ordained to this work of the Lord. And so it was like putting your hand to this. It was like an official rollout of that. But also the part of the ordination was to put your hand on the sacrifice. As they made the burnt offering, they made a couple more offerings, and so they would always put their hand on the offering to acknowledge an association with this animal that was about to die to cover their sins, and or the other things that those represented, and that will be part of the next chapter. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But that was what the consecration was to anoint them and go through the 7-day ordinations so that they could serve them as priests. Make linen undergarments. So this is like for all of the priests, make a linen undergarment as a covering for the body, reaching from the waist to the thigh. And this is quite literally the priest's underwear. And Aaron and his sons must wear them whenever they enter the tent of meeting or approach the altar to minister in the holy place, so that they do not incur guilt and die. And so these linen undergarments as a covering for the body, the words there being the covering of the body means their covering of their private parts. And so these were to quite literally this is your priestly boxer briefs to cover you, and you were to wear them anytime you were ministering in the holy place. And it's kind of one of these lines that everybody sort of snickers about, but you can imagine these robes and all they're doing, and these guys are slaughtering animals, and they're bending over, and they're working, and they're doing this work. and it would not be unheard of for them, what they were wearing, for them to accidentally expose themselves. And so to do so, it makes it very clear, don't bypass this, that you are to wear this covering on your body when you come into the tent of meeting or approach the altar to minister to the holy place, or you may incur guilt and die. I mean, this was a big deal. To not do that, to accidentally expose yourself, was to incur guilt. And it really shows the absolute reverence they were to have for the work that they were doing. This was very important work. This was not to be taken lightly. There wasn't a little snicker of guilt if somebody accidentally exposed themselves, but this was a big deal, that someone could die if this was not done well and done right. And so it becomes an exclamation point on this garment that they're putting together and how it was done, and with the reverence and the meticulous designs, but comes with this exclamation point that even speaks of the importance of the undergarment, that failure to do that correctly could even bring guilt and cause death. This is a lasting ordinance, last part of the last verse, for Aaron and his descendants. And so this was established, speaking mostly of Aaron and his sons at the beginning, but this was an ongoing, a sort of a heritage, and that the eldest son of the descendants would become the high priest and become these priests. Their sons would become the priest, and this would go from generation to generation. And the ordination, the clothing would be the same. The ordination process would be the same for them, and it would go from generation to generation. So that's the priestly garments. See, I eat this stuff up. I love this, and there's so much there. I think we kind of read through this quickly and we talk about these things, but man, you could really slow down and really spend a lot of time as why are these made this way? What does exactly this look like? And I think there's so much more that you could get really in depth on, and take before the Lord and let Him teach us even more about those things. So hopefully that's hopefully presented at a pace to bring the Bible to life for you, and to get the enjoyment of the Scriptures. And again, I think so much of this, the Old Testament, is ignored and not studied by so much of the church, and we're missing a tremendous blessing and important part of letting the Lord speak to us about who He is. And these were important things in those days, and I think that makes it important to us because it's in our Bible, and that every word is in there for His glory, for His purpose, and for our edification, for our growth. And so I hope that helps you get through chapter 28 and learn from those things. And thanks for joining me in this study, and look forward to seeing you in chapter 29, where we're going to talk about the actual process of consecrating those priests, ordaining them, and it's quite interesting. So we'll see you then. Thank you.